Scattered throughout Alabama and our world as well, there are places that hold strange unknown powers and secrets. Some of us have been fortunate enough, or perhaps unfortunate enough, to encounter these places. They are mystical, magical, perhaps enchanted, and sometimes cursed. They are known as vortexes, portals, doorways, passageways to other worlds and other dimensions, to times in the past or to times in the future. For the most part, they lay hidden, lurking deep in the shadows. So ask yourself before you make this journey tonight, can I handle the truth? But once you find the truth, your life is forever changed. You are now about to cross into the shadow regions, where reality and the supernatural mingle. Well, hello boys and girls, and I'm glad you decided to join me on this Alabama adventure. Today we take a little trip into the shadow regions, where reality and the supernatural mingle. Now where we're headed is into northern Randolph County, Alabama. There's a little community up there. It's not a very big community, but a community that I have known about for years and years. It's called Mad Indian. It's kind of an unusual name, but anyway, it's what they have up there is a little gas station, convenience store, and it's called Mad Indian Marina or something. I'm not sure. I can't remember right offhand, but I have got a picture of it on the little field trip that we're fixing to take. I'm kind of going blank this afternoon. It's been another long day. It was a pretty day here in Alabama. To begin with, this morning it was kind of cloudy and overcast, and it looked like it was going to rain. And then along about mid-afternoon, it just spared off. It was a very warm day, especially for February. And anyway, we're ready for some springtime down here, and I have a story I want to tell you about when we used to have to plant gardens. Many years ago. That's been a long time, but I wish I was still able to plant a garden like me and my parents and grandparents used to do years ago, and have some food that was real good whenever you cooked it or canned it or froze it or put it up. It was very good eating back then. But anyway, what I want to tell you about real quick is there when I was in the hospital here about a year or so ago, there was a young lady, one of the nurses in there, came in, and we got to talking about paranormal, as I always do wherever I go. And she related this story to me about this haunted house that's in Mad Indian, Alabama. Now, I'm not sure that you'll find Mad Indian on a map. I don't know if it's listed on a map or not. It's about halfway, or not hardly halfway, between Wedowee, Alabama, and Lineville, Alabama. And it's on Highway 48. And if you want to travel one of the longest roads in the state, I believe Highway 48 between Wedowee and Lineville is one of the longest roads I have ever driven on. It always has been. It seems like to me every time I go down through there, it gets longer and longer. And I wished up there the other day, whenever I went up there to do this little quick video I'm fixing to show you, I wish I'd have carried a sleeping bag and something to camp out with, like a frying pan and something to cook. I believe I would have camped out before we got back home. I left out early that morning on my way up there, and it was almost dark when I got home that afternoon, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time in Mad Indian up there videoing the store and the signs and that type of stuff. But it's just a long road to me. You need to travel that someday and see what you think. But anyway, let's get on to the little field trip right quick and tell you about the haunted house that's in Mad Indian.
And now, from the tail end of the Appalachian mountain chain in the heart of the South, this is Alabama Adventures.
All right, boys and girls, we finally made it to Mad Indian. That's up in the upper part of Randolph County, northern part of Randolph County. And if you want to spend an all-day trip on one road, either go to Lineville or Wedowee and go down, I believe it's 48. This is the longest road in the world. It takes all day I don't know how many miles that is. I'll check in just a few minutes. But it takes all day to go down this road. It's a long, long road. But anyway, we finally made it to Mad Indian. I'm going to show you a sign here real quick. Okay, that's the Mad Indian sign right there. Sign of store and marina, or marine. And anyway, I'll tell you about the store. That was my finger, just that there wasn't a ghost there. But anyway, we'll be talking about a haunted house up here in Mad Indian in just a few minutes. All right, I've got out and walked on up to the store, and this is a picture on the side of the store, the Mad Indian Quickie Mart, and give you a little idea of where we're at. And anyway, this is the front of the store, and over the top there you can see Mad Indian written there. This is just a little community up here in, let me get by this sign, Northern Randolph, and right over here is the Mad Indian subdivision. And it's down this road, right here is 48, and then this little road here turns to the, well, right down beside the store, and it's, hold on, this little road here would be County Road 57, Randolph 57, and it's right down there just a little ways of where the house is supposed to be. But anyway, I wanted to show you this, get a little closer so I can get a little better shot of it, over Mad Indian subdivision. And this sign's been here for a long time. I remember this being here for several years now. And anyway, always when I start doing these videos, somebody's going to walk in front of you or back in front of you, something. I don't know if they just want to get on or what it is. But anyway, there's some more jonquils out there. I'm going to get a shot of them right quick while we're here. I always like to look at them because you know springs are coming. And anyway, there's a sign right down there that says 48 East, and we're between, like I said, Wedowee and Lineville, Alabama. So anyway, now you've got an idea of where the story is going to take place. Well, all right, here we are back in the shack, and we're going to get on the story now. But I did Google the distance between Lineville and Wedowee, Alabama, and it says it's about 20 miles. That'll be the longest 20 miles you've ever ridden. Anyway, that is a long, long road. It just goes on and on and on. But I'll get off of that and get on to the story. So anyway, let's get this Alabama adventure going. All right, it was my understanding that this particular encounter, or ghostly encounter, whatever you want to call it, happened back in the late 1950s or maybe the early 1960s. Anyway, this girl and her sister and her mother and father all lived together. She was still living at home. And they had lived over around Atlanta, Georgia. And her dad had worked over there for many years, and he had retired, and he wanted to move back to Randolph County in his retirement. I believe that's where he was from originally. But for whatever the reason, if I once got out of Randolph County, I know I'd never come back. But anyway, he wanted to move back here to his home place, county. So anyway, that was what they did. They sold their house up around Atlanta, packed up everything they had, and moved back down here. They had the house, had already gotten the house before they moved down here, so they just moved in. The bad thing about this house, they had lived in Atlanta in those days, and they had power, electricity, and everything in the house, running water and everything up there. But when they moved back down here, this house did not have electricity, did not have running water. It had a well on the back porch, from what I understood, and the only light they had in the house was from kerosene lamps. But anyway, that's just the way things were back here in Randolph County in those days. Progress came slow. But anyway, let's get on to the story. They moved into the house, and they settled in there and had been living there for several weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months. Anyway, it was a big change from where they had moved from, but they were getting used to living out in the country. Adjusting to living without power and without running water. They had to go down to the well, or to the well, wherever the well was pretty close. Might have been on the back porch. I don't remember exactly where she said it was, but that's where they had to draw water, like to wash dishes and wash clothes, and take baths and that type of stuff. Draw it up a bucket full at a time, and of course put it in a tub, and that was the way that they used it. But anyway, said that the water was very good because it was well water. It tasted a whole lot better than the water they'd been getting up around Atlanta in those days, and I'm sure it did. But anyway, what happened to begin with, her mother would go to sleep at night, and she would have this dream, and she had pretty much the same dream over and over and over, while in the early days that they lived there. And what her dream was this man would come walking through the bedroom door, and he would pull up a chair by the bed, and he would start talking to her, telling about things that had happened in his life, and telling her about the house that he had built the house many years ago, and how he and his family loved it, and they had some children born there and everything. But for some reason, all the children, when they got a little older, died for some reason. That wasn't uncommon back in those days for children not to live very long because of disease and that type of stuff that went around, like typhoid, maybe not typhoid fever, but smallpox and other things like that went around back then, and just a lot of children died because of that. So that's what he would talk to her about in his dreams, and she mentioned it to some of the family that she was having this same dream every night, and this man would just come into the room and just start talking to her like he knew her. And so either her husband or one of the children said, ask him what his name is. So the next night, whenever she had this dream, that's exactly what she did. She remembered to do it. She really wasn't sure if she was having a dream or if this was some type of encounter that she was encountering this guy every night. Was he a ghost or a spirit or something like that? But she thought it was a dream. After that, he came in one night and sat down and went to talking about his wife. His wife had also died there in that house. And so anyway, this woman asked him, said, what is your name? And he told her his name. What I want to do before we get any further is I just make up some names for the people. Sometimes that makes the story a little bit more interesting or a little bit easier to understand whenever you've got names. Let's call the girl that told me this story, let's call her name Anna. And I got to get a name for her sister. I forgot that, but anyway, we'll get that in a minute. Let's call her father John and her mother Beth. Okay, now the man that's the ghost or the spirit or that's talking to Beth every night, his name's Paul Collins is what we're going to call him. And anyway, so he told her his name, and we're going to use the name Paul Collins was what he told her. And this went on night after night after night, and he just told her all kinds of things that happened to his children and his wife and him while they lived there in that house, and just had a good conversation. And Beth actually enjoyed hearing what he had to say. Some of his stories were very interesting and everything. So this, as I said, this kept going on. So one day, one of her brothers, Anna's brothers, I got to get a name for him. All right, now I think I've got me a list with everybody's name on it. There's a lot of people in this story. But anyway, let me get back to this. One day, her brother, David, and her sister, who we'll call Lori, was down in the woods next to a little creek down there, and they were playing, and they run up on this old cemetery. It wasn't a very big cemetery. It was like what we call here in the South a family plot, where whenever you own some land and there's not like a cemetery around many years ago, you just picked out a place on your land where you wanted to bury people when they died. And that's what they did, and that's what they found was this family plot down there. And the last name on the tombstone was Collins. So anyway, that was I'll tell you about that in just a minute. So anyway, whenever her sister and brother came in that afternoon from playing, they were telling their mama and dad, Beth and John Adams, that they had found a cemetery down there in the woods. And of course, they asked whose name was it on, how old was it, and it dated back to the 1800s. And she said a lot of them were like baby graves, children graves, small graves. But there was two down there that had, one had Beth Adams, and then one had Father John Adams on it, and they were dated back in the 1800s. So anyway, whenever this lady heard that, they had told the exact name of what this ghost or this spirit or this specter or whatever you want to call him had told her his name was, and it was actually on the tombstones down there in the woods. So the next morning, she goes down there to look to see if for some reason they have just made this up or what, because she had not told anybody what this man's name was yet. And anyway, when she got down there, sure enough, there was Paul Collins' name on a tombstone down there, and he had died many, many years ago. And so this was beginning to make her sort of think that something was going on more than her just having a dream. She began to believe then that she was encountering a spirit of some type in that house. So later that night, after she went down and looked at the tombstone, later that night when they were eating supper, sitting around the table, she told the family the story. The name on the tombstone matched the name of the man that she had been encountering every night. And of course now her husband, who was John Adams, just sort of laughed it off, said that there just wasn't anything to that there had to be some kind of coincidence or some reason for that. He didn't believe in ghosts and spirits and that type of stuff, and it was just a coincidence that the name she had come up with and then the name that their son had found down on a tombstone was the same. That was absolutely nothing to worry about. There was nothing wrong with the house because he wanted to live here in Randolph County, and he was happy with the house where they were living and did not want to move. All right, so that was the first encounter or something strange that occurred in the house. Not long after that, just a few weeks later, all the children were out playing in the yard and wherever, and Mr. Adams was working outside. He was going to plant a garden because the weather was warming up, and they wanted to have a garden like they had always had. And so that's what he was doing. He was getting the ground plowed up and ready to plant and everything. And his wife, Beth, was in the house, and she was going to clean house that day. She wanted it was kind of springtime, and back in those days, people did what they called a spring cleaning. You would go through the house cleaning it and carry stuff outside and let it air out the furniture, quilts and stuff like that. You would let them air out outside so they would smell fresh for the upcoming season, summer season or spring season. But anyway, Beth was in this one particular room, and she was sweeping. She was going to sweep it and then mop the floor to clean and everything. So anyway, as she was sweeping, she hadn't heard anything. She hadn't seen anything. Of course, now this man was still occasionally coming to her in her dreams or encountering her at night, and was still telling about things that had happened in the house and happened to him and this type of stuff. And she was she had got through sweeping the floor in there, and she started to mop, and she had her mop bucket and mop in there. And at one time, as she put the mop into the water to get it ready to mop the floor and everything, as she bent over to wring the mop out, as you have to do whenever you're mopping a floor, something hit her on the head. Something pretty hard, hit her pretty hard. And then she heard whatever it was hit the floor and kind of bounced off the wall and hit the floor over there. And she didn't know what it was or what could this possibly be. Where did it come from? And she got to looking, and in the floor where she had just swept and there was absolutely nothing there, she found a arrowhead. It was not a complete arrowhead. It was a piece of an arrowhead. It was, you could tell it was an arrowhead. It wasn't a perfect one, but something out of the ceiling or the wall or somewhere. The windows were shut that day, so nobody could have thrown one in the window at her. But this arrowhead hit her on the head pretty hard, and as I said, then it bounced off the wall and landed on the floor. Okay, that was the next kind of paranormal encounter in that house. Okay, now while this was happening, the family only had one car. They had a station wagon. I don't remember what model or year she said it was, but they had a station wagon. So the next day, after this arrowhead had hit this lady on the head, the man, John, sent Beth and the kids over to Lineville to the feed store to pick up some seed and fertilizer and that type of stuff that he needed. The next day he was going to plant the garden. He had got the ground prepared the day before, and that's what he was going to do. He sent them over there that morning to get what he needed to plant the garden, and that's what he was going to do. And of course, I guess his family would help him that afternoon get the garden planted. Anyway, they did. That's what they did. They got in the station wagon and drove over to Lineville and were getting what they needed, while Mr. Adams stayed at home. He had a little bit more work he wanted to do, this type of stuff. So anyway, around lunchtime, he went in the house to eat dinner. And as he went into the kitchen and made him a sandwich in there, and he was sitting at the kitchen table eating, and he heard this woman screaming like she was just dying or just something was bad wrong. He heard this woman screaming, and he looks around in the direction that he hears this sound, and now the kitchen door is closed to the living room. And all of a sudden, this woman runs through the door, not knocks the door down or busts through the door, it's a spirit. It's a ghost of some kind. She's all dressed in a white gown, and it's flowing behind her as she runs, kind of like a funeral shroud was back then. That's what they used to bury women in back in the 1800s, and so didn't bury them in just regular clothes. They had like a gown. It was a funeral shroud, and that was what this woman had on, and it was white, and it was flowing behind her, and her blonde hair was flowing behind her too as she ran. And as she ran through the kitchen, there was a little hallway that led out the back door, and the back door was closed down this hallway. And this woman was screaming, and as she ran by the table, she was screaming, "My babies are dead! My babies are dead!" just at the top of her lungs. And then whenever she got to the back door down this little hallway, she didn't open the door. She just disappeared through the door like a ghost or a spirit was. And this Mr. Adams was sitting there at the table and witnessed this whole thing. So Mr. Adams was not the type of man that became frightened at anything like this, and he didn't believe in ghosts until this point. Now he believed in ghosts, and he knew something was haunting this house, and he was ready to get out and move on somewhere else. So in the meantime, his family gets back from over in Lineville buying the gardening supplies and that type of stuff, and when they pull into the driveway, Mr. Adams has already about emptied the house. He's got furniture sitting on the front porch and clothes and everything else. And whenever they go up, they ask him what's going on, what's happened, that he has emptied the house as he had. And he tells them of his encounter with this ghostly woman that came running through the kitchen and down the hallway and through the back door. And that they're getting out of that house, that something is going on there. Now, he had not believed his wife, really, whenever she was telling about her encounters with this ghostly man at night and in her dreams, or was he just coming to her, was she just encountering him there in the bedroom. But now Mr. Adams was always laying in the bed too with her every night whenever this thing would come to her, either in her dreams or, like I said, it was in an encounter. But he never woke up. But this lady, when she come running through the kitchen screaming her babies were dead, and her gown was flowing and her hair was flowing, and this made a believer out of him that this house was haunted. And the lady that told me this, Anna, said that, I believe that was her name. Hold on. Yeah, that's what I'm using. Her name is Anna. She said this made a believer out of her dad, and that they moved out of the house that afternoon with everything that they could pack into the car. And what they could not get, they left. But anyway, that was a haunted house and a ghostly encounter that was in Mad Indian, Alabama, up in the northern part of Randolph County. Now, is that house still there today? I don't know. This was, like I said, back in the late 60s, early 1960s, 1970s. Is the cemetery still there, the family plot? I'm not sure. So much stuff has been destroyed with development and stuff around here. I'm not sure if that cemetery is there or not now. But anyway, that was a ghostly encounter that I want to tell you about in Mad Indian. Do let me correct the dates I just gave you. I said 1960s or 70s. It was late 1950s or early 1960s. Unless I am looking exactly at something, I sometimes don't get the dates exactly right. Dates to me are not all that important. What is important is what happened in the story. Sometimes dates kind of give you a time frame and that type of stuff. Was it 1800s? Was it 1900s? When it was? But anyway, it was in the late 1950s or early 1960s. Let me correct that right quick while we still on. But anyway, I'm going to bring this video to a close, and I hope you enjoyed this Alabama adventure, walking into the shadow regions once more. Might be if you're up that way and you want to check down that little county road, you might find the house down there. I don't know if you got out in the woods. I'm sure all the land's posted now with the way everything is and has changed so much over the years. But anyway, you might could talk to somebody up around Mad Indian, because when I went into the Mad Indian store and introduced myself to these people in there, I told them that there was I had received a story of a haunted house in that area. And when I said that, they both looked at each other with their eyes real wide open and like they were surprised that somebody else knew about it. So it could very well be that the haunted house is still up there now. You might want to check into it sometime if you're ever in this area. Anyway, I hope you like this video. If you do, give us a like. Well, I hope you like what we're doing down here with all our paranormal encounters and storytelling. And if you do, I certainly hope you subscribe to the channel. And I guess with all that being said, as Hank Williams used to say, good Lord willing and the creeks don't rise, I'll see you somewhere on down the trail.